Hey, this is Steve Halleck with TikToking. As always, find me at TikToking.com. I'm at Steve Halleck on Instagram. And I've got a podcast. So it's called TikToking. You can get it on iTunes. You can get it on Stitcher. I think a few others. And I've done a few episodes. I'm trying to do them every week. It's more for like general topics, so I'm still going to do video reviews here. I think if you're talking about a specific watch, it's best to see the watch, but I can talk about all other things related to the industry on the podcast, and you can get your fix if you're in the car or on a plane or who knows where you listen to podcasts. But anyway, check it out, and please subscribe to the channel, to the podcast, and let me know what you think about everything. So today I've got a very rarely seen, actually, and kind of very cool and very odd watch from what is now a mainstream brand. So this is kind of a particular oddball, and I thought we'd go over it. I really like this watch and think it's super underrated, but part of that is I just don't think anybody knows that it exists, really. So this is the Mille, and you may say, wow, that's a Mille. Yep. Mille RM063 Dizzy Hands. And they made this watch. It doesn't really fit at all into the rest of their catalog. It's sort of it's a different shape than most. It's got actually pretty difficult to execute complication that they never really explained much. And they just kind of made them and then made other stuff. and I don't blame people for kind of forgetting about this watch or never knowing about it in the first place. But it is one of their most maybe horologically interesting watches. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start the Dizzy Hands function because it takes a little while for it to really work. And I'm going to explain exactly what I'm doing. But to engage it, you press this button in the crown. Okay. So that's going to start the watch kind of doing its thing, all right? Now, let's discuss what its thing is. So the Dizzy Hands it's made to be a poetic complication, right? There's nothing practical about it. In fact, it's completely impractical. And the idea is that you can stop time, basically, or make time irrelevant. And kind of that's the ultimate luxury of maybe one of the ultimate luxuries in life, right, is to be able to make the passing of time and the calculating of time totally irrelevant and to just sort of exist at your own pace. And so the way that it works is when you engage the Dizzy Hand function, it's built like a chronograph, basically. So you have a column wheel right there that starts, stops, and resets the mechanism, and a single button. So it's like a Montpensier chronograph. But of course, this entire movement had to be engineered just for this piece. I have no idea how they can amortize that. It doesn't make any sense to me. And you can see here, this arm is now pointed right here, and you can see it says Dizzy Hands on it. So you know the Dizzy Hands is engaged when that arrow points at this arm. And I'll show you what happens when it's off. But you could see that before I pushed the button, I don't know if you paid attention to what time it was, but it was about 6 minutes to 9 o'clock. And now the watch, who knows what time it's showing. I mean, 12 is here now instead of there, obviously. And the hand is moved from right there to there. So what occurs is when you engage the Dizzy Hands function, this entire hours disc is a sapphire disc. You can see it there. And it starts going counterclockwise at 1 revolution every 15 minutes. At the same time, the hour hand starts going clockwise every 27.5 minutes. So the longer we let it go, the sort of crazier off time it will be. But you can see it's already, now it's only been like 2 minutes, and it's totally wild, right? Now, when you push this button, it immediately snaps it back to the correct time. So it is keeping track of the time as it goes. So we'll do that at the end. In the meantime, let's look at the watch itself. This particular one is in rose gold. The center case is titanium, and it's automatic. It's got a pretty cool rotor. And again, all this is sort of unique to this watch. I don't know of another Richard Mille in the collection that uses a rotor that looks like this, a movement that looks like this. Obviously, the complication is totally unique to this. This crown, I actually haven't seen in any other watch. There's sort of a startling amount of stuff that was made just for these pieces, and I can only imagine they lost money on this project. I don't know, it doesn't really make any sense to me. But the watch itself is totally wearable. It's not very big. I actually didn't look up the size before making this, but my guess is it's something like 41 or 42 millimeters, something like that. It fits really, really well on the wrist. Obviously, Richard Mille is sort of well known, and especially known on my channel, for having some of the most comfortable watches that there are, and this is no exception. It's super comfy. It wouldn't read on your wrist as a Richard Mille. That could be a positive or a negative, right? But I mean, Richard Mille is at the level of status now that if you go, if you're in the type of place where people know expensive things, they know it's a Richard Mille on your wrist when you've got any of the normal ones on. I don't think most people would think this is a Richard Mille from across the room. I might not even think that if I didn't see it a little bit closer up. I have this right now on the black rubber strap. They also have a croc strap with it, which gives it a whole other look, but this rubber strap is particularly comfortable, I think. It's got the standard Richard Mille deployant buckle, which works pretty well. It's this sort of Chanel-derived spring-loaded deployant, also in rose gold to match the piece. And anyway, I personally think it's a really cool watch. You have this brand that is sort of, in a lot of ways, turned into a fashion brand, and this is like a real piece of horology from them, with an actual poetic complication, very well executed, and the money on these is still really fair compared to, what else you would get. It's priced about the same as or a little bit less than a titanium RM11, and a lot less than a gold RM11, and not that much different actually than a gold RM10 right now. So again, I think that's mainly a function of the fact that, well, most people, of course, if they go to Richard Mille, they want the more traditional Richard Mille case, and also people just don't know that this watch even exists, and they don't really understand it. So hopefully this makes sense, because we're going to snap it back right now and you're going to get it. So right now you can see the hands show almost noon, but 12 o'clock is way down here now, so the whole thing has just gone crazy. And now I'm going to press this. What you're going to see is the hour disc is going to fly back to where it should be. So 12 is going to go up to 12. And the hour hand is going to go to where it should be, which should be about 9 o'clock, since it was set at 6 to 9, 6 minutes ago, right? The minute hand doesn't do anything on this watch. It just keeps going normally, right? So here we go. Boom. I think it's cool. And also the way that it moves is cool, right? Like you can watch it move and it kind of snaps back a little bit. It has a very nice feel isn't the right word, but almost visual feel. The way that the whole thing works on the spring just looks good. So anyway, this is the Richard Mille Dizzy Hands RM063, a watch that probably many of you watching this have never heard of, never seen, didn't know existed, and we're going to make it get dizzy one more time here. This time we can watch it for a few. It's slow enough that you can't see a huge amount of movement, but if you watch it for a little while, you can see it. The dial in particular that moves every 15 minutes, if you just sort of look where that circle is in comparison with the hour hand, you can see it moving. The 6 just got to that marker, and in not long from now, it'll pass it. But of course, when the watch is on your wrist, time goes pretty quickly, and you can see it, by the time you look back at your wrist, it's likely to be quite a bit off. So let's jump it back one more time. Not as dramatic that time, but there you go. RM063 Dizzy Hands. I hope you enjoyed it. This is not one that you should expect to see very often anywhere. So I'm glad to be able to share it with you. All right, check out the podcast, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my podcast. Let me know how you like it. I'm really trying to do something new there, and hopefully it's going well. All right, bye guys.